Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us in our adaptation webinar series. Today, we are going to hear from Hamilton and their perspective on response to extreme heat. I have on the call with me Shelley and Trevor from Hamilton, and I will introduce them shortly to you all. But first, I wanted to start. Oh, and I'm Desi from Clean Air Partnership, and I'm very happy to be your host today. I just wanted to start with land acknowledgement. Clean Air Partnership is Toronto-based organization, and we acknowledge that the land on which we operate is the traditional territories of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. In our effort to do more meaningful acknowledgement, we show short videos where we can learn more about the Indigenous culture and life. So in the next 1 minute, I'm going to show a short video about why Indigenous peoples respect their elders.
Why do Indigenous peoples care for and respect their elders so much? Well, I'll tell you. Our old ones, our elders, they are the ones that help guide us through life. We care for them because in exchange, they are the ones that teach us how to walk in a good way. They are the ones that show us how and where to walk so that we can find our Minno B'Madzuin, our good life. Many of our elders were the ones who were forced to face the oppressive acts that happen in residential school and boarding schools, and through their resiliency retained their culture so that we can have our culture here today. Our elders are the ones with the knowledge to bring life into this world, guide them through the four hills of life, and guide them with the proper instructions that when the time comes, they can move from this world into the next. That's why we respect our elders so much, and Chimigwech for watching.
Miigwech for watching. So very briefly, I'm going to go through the purpose of the series in the next few slides, and then we're going to move to the main part, which is the presentation from Trevor and Shelley. We'll have a Q&A, and then we have a few questions prepared for you and our mentee. I wanted to give you a heads up of what are the questions. They're a bit, I was hoping for a discussion. And that's what we're planning. But also feel free, I'm going to share now in the chat the Menti link. And feel free, if you're one of these people that are multitasking, you can go ahead, it's set up so that you can move to the next question. And feel free to answer them as you're listening to the presentation, if you're one of these people that is multitasking. If not, we'll have time for after the presentation. The first three questions are more general about heat response, and the other three questions are more related for bylaw. And to what scale should an adequate temperature bylaw be? Is it a citywide building level? How can we identify local electrical infrastructure constraints, and how could that impact the ability to enforce the bylaw? And what could be the negative consequences of this type of bylaw? Feel free to use the link in the chat. That's going to be directly give you access to Menti, or if you want to use your phone, you just go to, or any other device, you go to www.menti.com, and the code is 68685871. Otherwise, the purpose of the adaptation webinar series is really to see where our CAC municipalities are, at what stage, and then support them at the stage they are, which includes providing resources, also learning from other experiences and best practices, as well as discuss specific thematic adaptation and resilience initiatives, such as today's webinar talking about extreme heat response. These were the research questions that we gathered from you in the beginning of the webinar series, and what we're hoping is that with every webinar, I'm tailoring the presentations and the discussions that we have so that we can answer those questions. At the end of the webinar series, which will be in the fall, we'll produce a short kind of like a report or primer or briefing note, kind of like summarizing everything that we learned and answering these questions. Very quick plug-in. These are the two tools that can support you in your work. One is the climate policy database that tracks climate-related policies, and the other one is the Climate Action Atlas that tracks implemented projects. I'm going to share links to those in the chat very shortly. But now I don't want to waste more time. I really want to give more time for the presentation and the discussion after that. So I'm going to pass it to Trevor Imhoff, who is the senior project manager in planning and economic development at City of Hamilton, and Shaylee Rogers, who is a project manager at Healthy and Safe Communities. Thank you very much for both of you agreeing to be here and to present today. Trevor, you can take away.
Great, thanks so much, Desi. Just quickly sharing my screen here.
And while we are doing this, please ask your questions. Oh, never mind, there's no Q&A. So in the chat box, and I'll be moderating after that. Thanks. Take it away,
Great.
Trevor.
Thank you very much, Desi, and thanks everyone for having us. Again, my name is Trevor Imhoff. I'm a senior project manager. I'm in the somewhat newly created, as of November of 2022, Office of Climate Change Initiatives, where before that, I spent 8 years working in public health with Shelley, specifically on air quality and climate change, and now with our new office's mandate to oversee the implementation of Hamilton's climate action strategy. I'll let Shelley do a quick introduction to herself after my slides. With some of the great work, and she'll talk about a lot of the great work that they continue to lead on a heat response strategy. So just a quick recap of Hamilton's climate action strategy. This strategy was developed following Hamilton City Council's climate emergency declaration in March of 2019. It was approved and finalized in August of 2022 and comprises two main pieces of work. It's our main climate mitigation plan is our Recharge Hamilton, the Community Energy and Emissions Plan. That includes a technical low carbon scenario model using SSG's city and site model to model our actions to achieve net zero by 2050 and the corresponding targets within those actions as well. The other important and main piece of work is our climate adaptation plan following ICLEI Canada's Building Adaptive Resilient Communities framework. We developed the climate adaptation plan, which including the science of climate change for the city of Hamilton, which is looking at regional, global and regional climate modeling downscale to the local level, the creation of a climate vulnerability and risk assessment, the identification of top risks, and then the corresponding actions to help to address those risks and vulnerabilities addressed through that process. So just a quick shout out to my new team, the Office of Climate Change Initiatives. I was transferred, as I mentioned, from public health in November as the first staff person in the Office of Climate Change Initiatives. And now we have a great, still small, but definitely mighty team of climate change staff within our office, comprised of Dr. Linda Lukasic as our leader and director. We have a senior project manager, Catherine Winkleman, who works on a lot of the green building initiatives, including our Better Homes Hamilton pilot program, and Beatrice Okoko, who's working on a lot of our communications strategy, as well as the climate justice framework, and a new, just fairly new transfer, Adam Watson from Healthy Safe Communities, who's working on neighborhood resiliency, local urban agriculture, and community gardening. So as I mentioned, our office's mandate is to oversee, coordinate, and track the implementation of Hamilton's climate action strategy. And for those other climate staff, you know that can be all-encompassing all across the corporation for medium and small and large municipalities, any municipalities. As we know, climate change touches and influences almost pretty much every department and division across the city. So with that in mind, we wanted to get focused. And so we took a report to council in 2023, setting our priority focus areas, and they're laid out here. And the climate change governance and innovation, that's really about getting our own house in order and establishing important director level steering committees, as well as establishing a community climate change advisory committee, which actually Gabby Galapos is a Hamilton resident and executive director of Cleanup Partnership. She's on that committee. And so we're thankful to have expertise like Gabby, as well as other experts sitting around that community climate change advisory committee to help advise city council and staff as well. Part of the main focus of my work this year is developing a carbon budgeting and accounting framework. And as I mentioned, a big key work of my colleague Beatrice's work is around community climate outreach. We're definitely focusing on accelerating green buildings in terms of existing buildings and providing a pilot program offering up to $1 million in loans to private residents across Hamilton to retrofit their homes and switch to air source heat pumps. And so our target is to retrofit 50 homes through that pilot program. And last but definitely not least is urban greening. Hamilton is a very unique city, and that's why I fell in love working and living in Hamilton back in the early 2000s. We have lots of beautiful natural areas, but we also have a dense industrial urban core as well, where there's not a lot of tree canopy cover. And so an initiative our office is coordinating is the urban greening in those hard to green areas and looking at depaving projects as well to increase the natural areas across our urban and industrial areas. So the first main piece of work, our community energy and emissions plan, is broken down. I'm not going to go through all of them. You can see the main, we call these our low carbon transformations, and they are highlighted and align very well with our major sources of greenhouse gas emissions. And so within each low carbon transformation, there are specific targets that are modeled through the city and site model, and then the corresponding actions in order to achieve those targets to then eventually achieve net zero by 2050. I will say the city of Hamilton does have an interim target as well, which is 50% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. And from our most recent 2022 greenhouse gas emissions inventory, we are approximately 40% reduction based on a 2006 baseline. I'm the first to admit that the city of Hamilton can't really take any credit for that. That was former phase out of Ontario's coal-fired generating plants that resulted in the majority of greenhouse gas emissions within our inventory. But there have been significant progress made on our corporate energy efficiency objectives as well. Okay, so this is where I want to start getting more targeted in terms of this area and the purpose of this webinar around extreme heat. So within the Hamilton's Climate Change Impact Adaptation Plan, and shout out to our former colleague, Andrea McDowell, who helped to lead and develop this important plan. We developed this plan, what we're calling our four major resilient theme areas. So built environment, people and health, natural environment, agriculture and water, and energy and economy. And again, very similar to the community energy and emissions plan, each major theme has specific objectives and actions to help to achieve those resilient theme areas. And so specifically, and I think arguably, people and health is the most important theme. Climate adaptation is about protecting our citizens, our communities, especially those most vulnerable and historically marginalized that continue to be impacted unfairly by the impacts of climate change. And so within people in health, we have a variety of objectives of how we're going to work to do that. And you can see here a big focus is on vulnerable populations, specifically to help to address the impacts of extreme heat and extreme weather temperatures, as well as flooding. And then going down to the specific actions, which directed that city staff begin to undertake both short-term and long-term efforts to address excessive indoor temperatures in rental housing. So we did specifically highlight in Hamilton's climate adaptation, impact adaptation plan, that staff shall begin working and investigating both short-term, which is heat response strategy, which Shelley's going to talk about shortly, but as well as looking at long-term policy and bylaws. And so I'll talk a little bit about, so this plan was approved in November of 2022, which actually was happening around the same time as these important, what I'm calling the key factors for innovative municipal policies. And I'm sure longer standing municipal staff people may agree or disagree with me on these, or we'll have many more innovative or key factors that result in innovative municipal policies. But the ones that I see in Hamilton that really help to drive the adequate temperature bylaw forward is first and foremost the academic research. So the University of Waterloo's Intact Center on Climate Adaptation report highlighted and showed that Hamilton was within the top 10 risk for extreme heat impacts as an urban environment. We also have strong advocacy in Hamilton, and specifically wanted to give shout out to our Hamilton Acorn, who put out this report in September of 2022. The links both to the University of Waterloo and the Acorn Canada report are provided at the bottom of the slide that I believe Desi will share afterwards. As well as Acorn, through their membership, continues to do strong advocacy and delegations to our city council. And then in terms of course, what we all need as municipalities is strong progressive council decision-making. And so when Acorn came and following Hamilton's climate impact adaptation plan, there was a motion put forward by one of our councillors that directed staff to move forward on the creation of an adequate temperature bylaw. Now, what municipalities always face is the issues of resources, the issues of implementation of our respective climate action strategies. And Hamilton is actually participating in one of those, specifically ICLEI Canada's implementation cohort, because with many municipalities, we also struggle with how to implement all of the actions within Hamilton's climate action strategy. And so I think this was a very progressive and forward-thinking motion, and helping some direction from our senior leadership team as well. Our council was coming forward with some strong progressive rental protection bylaws, not just an adequate heat bylaw, but also a renoviction bylaw as well, what they're calling it, as well as a few other bylaws to help protect tenant rights. And so our senior leadership team knew that we needed the staff, we needed the capacity. And so it was kind of a competition, not necessarily a competition, but a note to council that says, okay, we support and want to work on this for you, but kind of put your money where your mouth is, so to speak. And so the direction was to refer these bylaws, as well as the FTEs, or the full-time employments, to develop these bylaws and then to implement them, to direct them to our 2024 tax-supported operating budget. And so these enhancements and business cases were put forward through the 2024 operating budget, and luckily, and good thing, ultimately approved, which then gave Planning and Economic Development, specifically our Municipal Law Enforcement Division, the capacity to develop these very important bylaws, and more importantly, the confirmation that that division, MLE, the Municipal Law Enforcement Division, can then implement those bylaws. And last, but I'll end here and pass it over to Shelley on some of the great work that public health is doing. But this is just, and I'm providing a link to our budget, our Planning and Economic Development budget presentation, which specifically asked for increases in terms of, so our safe apartment building bylaws, which the adequate heat bylaw would be incorporated into that work as well. An additional 25 full-time employment in terms of being able to develop and then implement these bylaws. As I mentioned, we also have a development of a renovation license and relocation bylaw, which also include an additional 8 FTEs and corresponding operational budget impacts as well. So I think when Desi and I and the team were talking about this, this was an interesting and progressive way to develop these policies, and really making sure that as a city, we had confirmation from our leadership and our council that yes, this is the direction that you want staff to go in, and also that we have the required capacity, both in terms of FTE and operational budget, to implement these innovative policies and these important policies moving forward. So with that, I'll stop there and hand it over to Shelley Rogers in Public Health Services.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shelley Rogers, and I'm a project manager for air quality and climate change in public health services with the City of Hamilton, and we're under the Healthy and Safe Communities Department. So next slide, please. So today we are going to talk about the City of Hamilton's heat response strategy. And this strategy went to Public Health committee on April 29th and to council on May 8th. And the strategy includes items that are part of our climate change impact adaptation plan that Trevor spoke to, and also actions from our community heat response plan. And the heat response plan is what we do on during a heat warning, and it's probably very similar to what other municipalities are doing. And essentially, when there is a heat warning issued, we send out messaging to community partners who provide services during these periods of time. So this could be anything from offering free swimming at city facilities or opening up cool spaces within the community. And in addition to that, the Salvation Army distributes water in the downtown core of Hamilton. And we do have a few additional items that happen during an extended heat warning, which can be issued locally if the heat warning goes on for a longer period of time. And we also have our Emergency Operations Center here in Hamilton, which can be activated if it becomes more of an emergency situation during that period of time. To the best of my knowledge, I don't know if I don't think we've had to activate it for this, but it is there if it gets to that point. So next slide, please. So in March of 2023, Public Health Services was tasked with creating a community heat strategy. And to do this, we did a literature review to see the latest literature on actions that could be implemented. I think through this, we really realized that it's a multi-level approach to address this. Not just one thing on its own is going to address extreme heat. So in the strategy, we have 10 heat related items that involve various city departments. Our strategy is it gives direction to City of Hamilton corporate departments, and we are to work with community partners, but it's not asking community partners specifically to do certain actions. It's asking city departments to do those actions and work with the community. So 5 of the actions that were identified are considered to already be in practice, and we are going to expand on those items a bit, but they have already been initiated, and 5 are considered new. And this response aligns with mandated work of public health services, which is outlined in the Ontario Public Health Standards. So next slide, please. Thank you. So for this, we did a fair bit of consultation with groups representing at-risk populations within our community through our extreme heat working group. And this group was originally formed as part of a project through ICLEI Canada that dealt with extreme heat in social housing. So we asked the people who were in that group if they'd like to continue on with this work moving forward. And they did, they stayed on, and we invited people who are part of our community heat response group. And we joined together to form this group. And we also included people from different committees within the city. And we had people coming to us to join. So that was really exciting. And I feel like it was a success, because I think that this is a topic that's on a lot of people's minds. And it was really great that people reached out and participated in this group. So next slide, please. So this slide has a list of all the people who were in our extreme heat working group. And if any of you are in the webinar right now, I just want to say again, thank you so much. Your work on this was involved, like it was so valuable. Like we really appreciated that. It's everything from groups that represent tenants, the Hamilton Legal Community Legal Clinic was in there, various city departments. We had groups that provide services in the community like the YWCA, Wesley, Salvation Army. It was a large group of people, and it was it was a lot of different perspectives, and it was so important to hear from everybody there, and we got a lot of good ideas from the group. So next slide, please. Thank you. So in our literature, public health services, just to note, we identify people at highest risk for heat-related illness as people who are older adults, young children, people with chronic medical conditions, people who work or are active outdoors, and people who live with disabilities. And we have used heat mapping, which we can show in the next slide, to identify highest risk neighborhoods. And we're tailoring a response accordingly using this mapping, because we do know that these are the communities who are going to require the services most, and like our different actions the most. And so we are using that as we move forward with that. So next slide, please. So this is a screenshot of the heat map that Laval, the University of Laval put together. And if you haven't seen this before, I strongly recommend taking a look. It doesn't just look at heat islands, it also looks at the vulnerability within these areas and how people can address heat, extreme heat. So we have been using this for different actions so far, and we'll continue to use this mapping. I'll talk about a project that we are working on in a few minutes, but this map has been very, very handy for us as we've been developing the strategy, and it's going to be very important as we implement our strategy. So next slide, please. So speaking of the strategy, we had a few existing items here that we have already had in practice. So the 5 items are education and outreach, heat warning notification, cool places, cooling and energy efficiency support, and vegetation cover expansion and maintenance. So in the cooling and energy efficiency support, we do have the adequate temperature bylaw included in that section there. So I think this is probably something that most of us are here to discuss today. So that's where it landed. We do have that under existing because, as Trevor said, it's already in the works. It's already been directed to be worked on. And the next slide has our new actions. So these are wellness check-ins. So for that, we're working with our paramedics right now to see to look into having paramedics do check-ins on clients that they have in specific programs. Shade structures, heat-related illness, population health surveillance, misting stations, and transportation. So it has been brought up to have transportation that's reliable and free or discounted to cool spaces, because we do know that transportation can be a barrier. So we want to help people out with that. So our next slide, we have, this is one example of education and outreach that we have been working on. It's landlord education within the city, and we do have information on our website with resources at hamilton.ca/heatlandlord. And we use that mapping as well as some of our GIS information internally to do a mail out to property managers and landlords within the highest risk areas. And we're providing them with information on how to protect their tenants during extreme heat, and giving them resources that they can use for that purpose. So we're working on that. We do have those resources on our website as well. And if anybody wants to check them out to see what we're working on there, please feel free to visit our website. And the next slide, we have another initiative that we're working on right now, and it's the distribution of cool kits. So this idea was adopted from Vancouver. And so we have two types of kits that we're distributing. So one type is for people who are housed but don't have air conditioning in their home. And the other is for people who are unhoused and maybe living in an encampment. So the kits for people who are housed and don't have air conditioning will include a bin. So if they want to put cool water in it and soak body parts in that, they can. Ice packs, cooling towels, cooling neckties, a magnet with different things they can do to cool off during the extreme heat. And also it has space so they can write their emergency contact information on it. They have a thermometer so they know how warm their unit or their home is. And we're going to be including bus tickets now so people can go and visit a cool space within the city, and a personal misting bottle. And if that misting bottle is small enough that if they wanted to take it with them on the go, that they could do that. And the kits that we have for people who are unhoused contain sunscreen, sunglasses, like a water bottle, and a list of places they can go to refill their water bottle, and to cool places as well. So maybe, thanks, Trevor. So our next steps as we move forward will be to continue to collaborate with partners and to consult with at-risk communities to see how we can best deliver our services. We have just recently started a new project. We're going to be holding focus groups in our highest risk neighborhoods to speak to people to find out how they access cooling and what the barriers are for accessing cooling, so we can help deliver our services in a more efficient way for these people. So we are currently scheduling all our focus groups, and I'm looking forward to where we land with that. I'm sure there will probably be some information towards the fall or in the before the end of the year that we receive from that. And we're going to continue to work with our partners again as well to identify gaps and align our services with the needs of the community. And we are going to implement all of the newly identified actions that have been approved by council. So that's it for me. Thank you. And looking forward to answering any questions and hearing what everybody here has to say about their experiences with this work.
Thank you very much, Shelly, and thank you very much, Trevor, for your presentation. I love, and as Trevor said, I love how we kind of like capture also the governance piece that leads to an enabling factor for like Shelly and the public health to do this awesome work. As everyone who's been with us know, that last year we did the governance and accountability piece, and Trevor kind of like speak up a little bit of this, that there are certain things that need to be aligned in order to reach implementation. And in this case was really the progressive way to ensure that operation budget for this year and then staffing, it's in place in order to develop the adequate bylaw and then implement it as well. And then on the other side, we even like had comments here, Shelly, as you were talking, that this cool kits really look great and are great examples of kind of like an action that is really helpful. So thank you so much. We are opening now for question. Go ahead and ask your questions in the chat. You can also raise your hand. I will also put the Menti slide, Menti link again, and we will review it shortly. I just want to see if there's someone else with more questions. Thanks, everyone. We do have answers in the Menti. Feel free to respond there as well, or ask the questions here. So Martin, write your question in the chat. Meanwhile, I will share with you what we have thus far on the Menti, and then we can kind of like discuss it. You should be seeing the slide, right? So to the first question of to what scale should an adequate temperature bylaw be And is it a citywide, neighborhood level, or building level? I see that the majority of you are responding for citywide. Citywide, does the province not Oh, so is that a question? Does the province mandate a temperature bylaw? I don't think so. It's individual municipalities that act on this.
Yeah, Desi, maybe I can just help to clarify this question too. This was one of the questions that I proposed to the group because I think as our municipal law enforcement division looks to develop and then implement this bylaw, I agree, and I think the question is a little bit too broad, but I agree the bylaw should be applied citywide. But I think the specific question here is to what extent do we enforce adequate temperatures within a certain area? So for example, there like most municipalities, and that was directed through the province. I forget when, years ago, when a lot of municipalities, well, all municipalities have minimum temperature bylaws. So in the winter, a landlord cannot turn off the heat if the landlord must or shall provide enough heat to a certain temperature within every single unit. And so the question that I continue to have, and I think other staff in other municipalities is what level of implementation should an adequate temperature on the reverse side for cooling? Should it be at the individual unit level? Is that possible? And I think some other the questions allude to the potential infrastructure challenges for both building and feeder line electrical grid capacity issues, costs, etc. But for sure, like the gold standard and the best practice is to have similar to the adequate enough heat. It is per unit, so therefore we should be striving for per unit. But the difficulties with enforcement, implications of that, both environmentally speaking and infrastructurally speaking, is something that I'd be interested to hear from the group on.
Right. No, thanks, Trevor, for elaborating on this. And like my first thought, and we discussed about this, was that, wow, and you mentioned why the bylaw is citywide. I was thinking that knowing that we always are restricted by resources, like where the action need to happen is exactly where the most vulnerable population is in the extreme heat. And as Shayla was showing on the map, so there's like a priority areas to like act on. But then, it's a good question to to keep discussing. Meanwhile, I have questions coming up in the chat as well. Where does the authority come to pass a municipal bylaw for adequate temperature? Is that the municipal act?
Yeah, I can take a crack at this. Definitely not a lawyer. So we rely on our legal staff to provide the legal opinions on that. But my understanding, it is through the Municipal Act, where it gives the authority. I forget what section of the Municipal Act it is in, but it gives the authority to municipalities to pass laws, policies, bylaws for the protection of their citizens. There are also direction too within the Municipal Act around environmental protection as well. So we continue to work with our legal staff to see what all authorities the municipality has. But when it comes to the protection of their citizens, which we've identified that extreme heat is a public health issue and continues to be a growing public health issue, that the city would have, the municipality would have authority to pass such a bylaw.
Right. The next question, it's kind of like related to, I'll come back to this, but here are the negative consequences, because I see that Martin is asking, how will the city avoid rent hikes that will adversely affect low-income families? I'll pass it back to you, Trevor, but at the same time, that's what I was saying, that we would like to discuss this, because I don't think and that's what's the meeting purpose. It's like not really, I don't think Hamilton has all the answers in place, and it's very good to, that's why we have this group, and I'm happy that you're answering these questions, because this is something that other municipalities have reached out to us in like moving in the direction either of a bylaw or anything that can support those in more need in such extreme heat events, especially now coming up with the summer. So it is something that it's worth discussing. But Trevor, do you have anything to add kind of on that?
Maybe just some commentary and some input, and I'll just reiterate, yeah, Hamilton definitely doesn't have all of the answers, and we continue to grapple with these, I'll say, competing issues or unintended consequences. And so we're very aware of the, maybe not all of the unintended consequences, but the unintended consequences related to the impacts on existing tenants and the, what we're calling, what we'll say, the downloading of costs, for example, to the tenants. And I'll say, I mentioned in the presentation that there's a variety of bylaws being created in Hamilton for the specific protection of tenants. Specifically, one of them is what we're calling a renoviction bylaw that will provide greater support and resources to tenants when their landlords apply for, and again, I'm not a lawyer and don't have expertise in landlord-tenant board issues, but I think it's called the renoviction. What is that called? Is it an N12? I think a landlord can file when doing large-scale renovation work. I could be wrong on that, but when landlords are applying for large-scale renovations, there are, through this renoviction bylaw, there will be interventions from municipal law enforcement. Of course, we don't have the authority to stop or to direct the landlord-tenant board from issuing that eviction order, but there are interventions that we, as a city, intend to make, which includes resources and education to the tenants to help them better understand their rights. And I think the same principles would apply to this future aperture bylaw. I'll make a quick shout out to our Better Homes Hamilton program, also providing loans, building. And we are allowing landlords to apply to that build retrofit loan but through that loan program, we're stating within the other agreement that any retrofits that result in the relocation of any tenants or any impacts on tenants would not qualify for the loan, and so the landlord needs to that. So there are avenues that a city could help to avoid those unintended consequences, but at the very heart of it, in my mind, it's the education and awareness piece to help tenants, empower them to understand their rights and to help them navigate those rights.
Right. Yeah. And I could see here, and I think you see it also on your other slides, that that's one of that first comes in my mind, the cost that it's going to go for tenants if there is like AC units, for example. But what other cooling solution can landlords provide in order to meet this adequate temperature bylaw?
Yeah, I'll hand it over to Shelley maybe if you wanted to talk to some of the innovative interventions that the Extreme Heat Working Group and through those previous initiatives have been thought of, because I think what will be specifically in the adequate temperature bylaw definitely still to be determined. It's still being developed, and I know Shelley alluded to that in her presentation that it's in development. I just want to do full disclosure that the city of Hamilton has not passed this adequate temperature bylaw yet. And as far as I'm aware, the current timeline is to bring a report back in June to the General Issues Committee for future either adoption or direction on approving the adequate temperature bylaw. So I think we're uncertain about what will be within that bylaw, but I think there are other innovative cooling strategies that the Extreme Heat Working Group, for example, some of the great work that Public Health has done previously, that it doesn't necessarily have to be air conditioning window shakers in every unit. There could be other innovative strategies that could be implemented. So Shelley, if you wanted to maybe allude to some of that, that'd be great.
For sure, yeah. So, I mean, it could be things like having a cooling room that's accessible, that's, maybe a nice place to be, making it more comfortable. In our project with ICLEI Canada, we bought some nice chairs and things so that people would be more comfortable when using these spaces. So there are things that you can do like that. I think that education is important and providing resources too, so people know what heat-related illness is, and when what the signs and symptoms are, and when you might want to get medical attention. Hopefully it doesn't come to that, but having that knowing there. With our campaign, we were sending out signs so they could put the address of the closest cooling center to them. So places people could go, options that they have to go and cool off if they don't have it in their home. So I mean, I know that's not the same thing as a bylaw, but these are kind of things that can be put into place that are there. So those are some options that can be put into place. But there are other things too, like vegetation, having shaded areas where people can get out of the sun. I think that those are going to be important as we move forward too. And then, we're talking about there's misting stations. There's a lot of interest in misting stations, more than I ever thought there would be. People really love that idea. So, like there are things like that. I don't think that a landlord would go around putting misting stations everywhere, but I do think that there are, other things that can be done, that can happen, that would address this as well. And making sure people have access to drinking water, things like that can be really important as well.
I also like it was part of the presentation of the new what is it, new actions that were suggested about the transportation, because I think that's like a crucial piece, especially for unhoused people, because we see and we know that in the winter that's where sometimes they look for a shelter, and I never thought about the other way, that in the summer it's also similar. So that's very good to see it there. We ask you as well, because as we said, we would like this to be a two-way discussion, not just us answering. So please go with Menti. And one of the questions was, what are some other avenues to address heat waves? And I do kind of like Shelley did kind of like speak, I think, to most of them, which is the forestry and the importance of greenery, cooling centers, passive cooling, temperatures max for outdoor workers. And vulnerable population communication plan, which is part of what Shelley was presenting, and the fact that you put in place the pieces in order to know where is exactly this vulnerable population in extreme heat, and then targeting your education campaign to that. That's also leading to I guess to this kind of like solutions. I don't think there is like one solution. I don't think the bylaw is gonna also save the kind of like, it's not a silver bullet. So I believe that there needs to be multiple places, multiple things in place in order to really be prepared for this heats that are coming. I'm gonna now check some of the other questions. We covered that one. How can we identify local electrical infrastructure constraints, and how could that impact the ability to enforce bylaw? I'm sorry, I'm just reading with you as well. Work with utilities. That's definitely something that on many levels, not just for this bylaw, but for like also installing solar panels and general municipalities supporting the communities to electrify. This communication with utility needs to be there. Let me see, retrofits, which are scaling up through building performance standards, more funding, right? Leverage interdivisional sectoral expertise to identify constraints and opportunities could greatly impact the feasibility of enforcing and implementing the bylaw. Thank you for answering these questions. Meanwhile, I'm seeing questions are coming in the chat as well. Okay, that's an interesting one, and I would like to ask this question for everyone in the call, especially if there is like other public health units as well. But what kinds of systems are in place to manage potential cascade effects, power failure that cause elevator and water pumping failure in towers, impact of heat on frontline emergency response workers? Any thoughts on that?
I can maybe quickly start, Desi, and then love to hear from other people on the call as well. But specifically about outside and frontline emergency workers, that is a specific action within our resilient theme to people in health. And so looking at updating and more progressive policies related to outside work. And so although we again haven't gotten far on that, that is an action within Hamilton's climate action strategy. Also, there is a resilient theme. Our fourth one, energy and the economy, really speaks to the need about that emergency, specifically low carbon backup power within our critical services. And so Hamilton Water, for example, would be considered a critical services with the water, wastewater, and the pumping stations, but as well as looking at providing low carbon backup power within our recreational facilities, because we know those recreational facilities also provide a potential cooling center as well. So in the event of a power outage, those cooling centers wouldn't be able to operate without backup power. And so this is where there's potential unintended consequences, that if we have a bunch of generators being powered by diesel or natural gas, we're just increasing greenhouse gas emissions through our adaptation actions. So really looking at that holistic approach to provide low carbon backup powers to those critical services.
Right. Is anyone on the call? Hossein, I may turn back to you. I see that you're from Toronto Environmental Alliance. I was wondering, I think I heard that TRCA is working on some scenarios with that, or if someone else is, or if someone from TRCA is here. Are you aware of anyone that is actually working on this and providing kind of like scenarios and how this can look either for the region here in the Toronto Greater Hamilton area or elsewhere? Anyone? Hosan, can I call you? Are you aware of any? I'm
currently not aware, so I'm still I'm kind of like newish in, like, I'm the climate campaigner Toronto Environmental Alliance, so I'm kind of newish into the building space and to the emergency space. I've been primarily focused on mitigation up until this point, but it is one of those things that I do think about, it, like, you know, what the city's role is, because I imagine, like, for example, if there's a power outage and then suddenly you have towers, we all know people in the upper floors of towers are going to be the most heat stressed. So there's no elevator, there's no electricity, there's no water going up into those floors. And then the emergency service workers, even though they've been driving around and like trying to protect people all day, have to walk up 20 flights of stairs during the middle of the heat wave, making sure. So that's just like these types of potential cascading effects that can occur. Yeah, I recall back in, for example, when we had that big power outage in 2003, when the entire Eastern Seaboard, that was a really hot week in August, I believe. And you know, people talk about like how fun it was to like barbecue everything, but it is one of those concerns that I have, that like these types of like cascading potential effects. And so it is one of those things that like, I don't know, I know that I have heard, and I know there's some folks here from City of Toronto staff. I've heard that City of Toronto staff are going through some scenario planning internally on these types of emergencies, but it is curious. I do have a curiosity as to like, what does that look like? To what extent are people actually and our services actually looking into it seriously, finding solutions to some of these issues that these cascading effects can occur, because we rely so much on our frontline services for emergencies, and when you have an entire city or an entire like the GTHA under a severe heat emergency, what
Yeah.
does that look like, right?
I know this was exactly, this was brought to us, and even like last year, and so that's why I was wondering if anyone is doing. I think, and I can reach out and confirm with maybe in my summer notes for this, if TRC it's doing any work on that. Otherwise, I may call out someone. I see Library in Toronto here logo, but it was brought to us, and if there is a need for that, we can have potentially. Cohort or some meeting, like CAC can organize this, so we can a little bit brainstorm, because I don't think we have the solutions. I don't know what else is working there, but if there is a need for us to put our brains together specifically on cascades, that's some cascade effect that may be of interest. Maybe can someone show me if this is something that your municipality will be interested? Kind of like show a hands or thumbs up. If possible. I do see that we are kind of like at the end of the webinar, and I don't know if I can call out someone from Toronto if they're doing something on this cascade effects. I see Shireen.
Hi there. I am on the outreach and engagement team. I am also relatively new and I'm not familiar with work that's currently being done on this. But I think if it's not already happening, that there would definitely be interest.
Thanks, Shireen. I see Adrian. Adrian Lu, can I call you? You may be more aware of such group if it's happening in Toronto or such research. Oh, are you here? I lost you. No. Okay. Well, anyway, so I guess that's my to-do for next webinars is I'll dig in a little bit and see if someone is doing something so that we can either invite them, and if it's a missing piece, then we're more than happy to support a meeting on that topic. As I said, when we were gathering the research questions, this was actually one of the questions, so I do need to respond to that. So that's on my end. Otherwise, I did share it in the chat, but we will be sending for everyone that registered the recording and the slides, and in the fall we'll produce kind of like a report from all of the webinars and all of the and the series that we have. So you can have that kind of like piece handy in one place. Now, I really want to thank so much Trevor and Shelley for your time and your presentation. We are going to be looking to see how it's going to go. I think, Trevor, you said in June is when it's the first report, and how this is going to roll out. And I'm sure that many municipalities will be learning from your experience. Sometimes it's difficult to be the first, and but it is very helpful, and it's very helpful that you're willing to share with all of us. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the day, everyone.
Thanks, Desi. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shelley.